They say the devil is in the details, but sometimes he's sitting right across the table from you, wearing an Armani suit and a smile that cuts like glass. Harrison thought he had won. He watched his wife Evelyn pick up the pen, her hand trembling, ready to sign away a 10-year marriage and a billion-dollar empire for absolutely nothing. He mocked her silence. He laughed at her defeat. But Harrison forgot the most important rule of business: never celebrate a deal until the ink is dry, and never ever assume you're the one holding the pen. He thought she was signing her life away. He had no idea she had already burned the contract to the ground 3 days ago. The conference room on the 44th floor of the Sterling Holloway building in downtown Manhattan smelled of lemon polish and aggressive capitalism. It was freezing, a tactical decision Harrison Caldwell always made during negotiations. Keep the room cold, keep the opponent uncomfortable. Evelyn Caldwell sat on the edge of a mid-century modern leather chair that cost more than her father's Honda. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple grey cardigan, one she'd had since college, and no jewelry. Her ring finger was bare, a pale band of skin, the only evidence that a 3-carat diamond had once rested there. Across the mahogany expanse sat Harrison. He was leaning back, checking his reflection in the screen of his phone, flanked by his legal team, 2 sharks named Silas and Brecker, who billed by the heartbeat. "Well," Harrison's voice broke the silence, smooth and patronizing. He didn't look up from his phone. "Are we doing this today, Evie, or do you need another hour to cry in the bathroom?" Silas, the older lawyer, with a face like a crumpled road map, suppressed a smirk. "Mr. Caldwell, perhaps Mrs. Caldwell needs a moment to review the adjusted terms." "Adjusted terms?" Evelyn repeated softly. Her voice was steady, though her eyes were downcast. "You mean the removal of the alimony clause?" Harrison finally looked at her. He had that look in his eyes, the one that used to make her feel safe, but now just looked predatory. It was the look of a man who enjoyed pulling the wings off flies, provided the flies were expensive. "Evie, look at me," Harrison said, leaning forward, clasping his hands. "You cheated on the prenup, or well, you tried to find a loophole. You dragged this out for 6 months. My generosity has expired. You get the lake house, which we both know is a money pit, and you keep your little charity foundation that hasn't made a profit since inception. Everything else, Caldwell Logistics, the portfolio, the patent holdings, stays with the adults. Sign the papers and you can walk out of here with your dignity. Don't, and I'll bury you in litigation until you're selling that cardigan on eBay." It was a bluff, partially. But Harrison was good at bluffs. He was a man who had been featured in Forbes as a visionary of the supply chain. He was charismatic, ruthless, and currently dating a 23-year-old Instagram model named Chloe, who thought logistics was a type of skin cream. Evelyn reached for the black Mont Blanc pen, resting on the document. The paper was thick, creamy. The settlement agreement and mutual release. "The lake house," Evelyn murmured. "And the shell." "The shell." Harrison laughed, a sharp bark of a sound. "Oh, right. The Caldwell Innovations Holding Company. The one holding the dead IP for that failed solar project in Nevada Shore, Evie. Take it. It's got a tax liability of $40,000 attached to it. Consider it a parting gift." Brecker, the junior lawyer, leaned in and whispered something to Harrison. Harrison waved him off. "Let her have the scraps, Brecker. If she wants to play CEO with a bankrupt shell company, let her. It saves us the filing fees to dissolve it." Evelyn opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the text. She wasn't reading it. She had memorized every clause, every comma, Every indented paragraph 3 nights ago, when her own lawyer, a man named Arthur Pensky, who worked out of a strip mall in Queens, had emailed it to her. Arthur wasn't here today. Harrison had insisted on a friendly meeting without unnecessary counsel to save on fees. Another tactic. Isolate the victim. "You really think I'm stupid, don't you, Harry?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Harrison sighed, checking his Rolex. "I don't think you're stupid, sweetie. I think you're quaint. You were a great art history major. You throw lovely dinner parties, but business. This is a shark tank. You're a guppy. I'm doing you a favor by cutting you loose before you get eaten." He stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city. "Sign the papers, Evie. I have a lunch reservation at Le Bernardin at 1. Evelyn watched his back. She remembered the man she had married 10 years ago. He hadn't been this cold then. He had been hungry, yes, but not cruel. Success hadn't changed him. It had just revealed him. It acted like a developer fluid on a photograph, slowly bringing the sharp, dark edges into focus. She remembered the nights she stayed up editing his pitch decks. She remembered leveraging her own inheritance from her grandmother, a modest but real sum, to cover the payroll during the 18 crash. He had forgotten that. To him, history was just something you rewrote to make yourself look better. She uncapped the pen. The ink was black. Permanent. "Okay," she said. Harrison spun around, a triumphant grin breaking across his face. "Smart girl." Evelyn signed her name. Evelyn Sarah Caldwell. She signed the waiver of spousal support. She signed the transfer of the primary residence. She signed the release of claims on Caldwell Logistics. And then she signed the transfer document for Caldwell Innovations LLC, accepting full ownership and liability. She closed the folder and pushed it across the table. The silence in the room was heavy, but for Harrison it felt like victory. He snatched the folder up, handing it to Silas. "Check it. Make sure she didn't dot an I with a heart or something." Silas flipped through the pages. "Signatures look valid. Notarized by the standing clerk outside. It's done, Mr. Caldwell." Harrison let out a long exhale, his shoulders dropping. The tension of the last 6 months evaporated. He was free. He kept the money. He kept the power. And he got rid of the wife who had started asking too many questions about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. "Well," Harrison said, buttoning his suit jacket. "I'd say it's been a pleasure, Evie, but we both know I hate lying." He extended a hand, expecting her to shake it. A final humiliation. Evelyn didn't stand up. She didn't take his hand. She simply reached into her tote bag, a battered canvas thing that looked out of place in the sleek office, and pulled out a single thin file folder. It wasn't legal size. It was standard letter size, blue. "I have something for you too," she said. Harrison frowned, his hand dropping. "What is this? A love letter? A beg for a second chance?" "No," Evelyn said. "It's a notification. Since I am now the sole owner of Caldwell Innovations LLC, and you have just legally severed all ties to it, waiving any right to its internal governance or assets. I thought you should see the minutes from the board meeting I held this morning." Harrison chuckled, looking at his lawyers. She held a board meeting for a company with no employees and a negative bank balance. That's adorable. "Just read it, Harrison," Evelyn said. Her eyes finally locked onto his. The meekness was gone. The fear was gone. In its place was a flat, cold boredom. Harrison, annoyed, took the blue folder. He flipped it open. He scanned the first page. His brow furrowed. He flipped to the second page. His face went pale. "What is this?" he whispered. "It's the transfer deed," Evelyn said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "You see, Harrison, you were so focused on Caldwell Logistics, the shipping trucks, the warehouses, the visible noise, that you forgot how you structured the company back in 2019. Harrison looked up, his eyes wide. That's not possible. In 2019, Evelyn continued, her voice gaining strength, echoing slightly in the quiet room. To avoid a massive tax hit from the European expansion, you moved the intellectual property, the proprietary software that runs your entire logistics fleet, into a separate holding entity. You moved it into Caldwell Innovations. "No," Harrison stammered. "No, we moved it back. Silas, we moved it back in 2021. Silas was frantically typing on his laptop. I'm checking the records, sir. The paperwork was drafted. It was drafted, Evelyn interrupted. But you never signed it, Harrison. You were in Cabo with your assistant that week. You told me to handle the paperwork. So I did. I filed it in the pending drawer. And then, well, life got busy, and you forgot." Harrison looked at the paper in his hand. It was a confirmation of IP ownership. "The trucks are yours, Harrison," Evelyn said, picking up her bag. "The warehouses are yours. The office building is yours. But the software, the code that tells the trucks where to go, the algorithm that manages 80% of your client efficiency, that belongs to Caldwell Innovations." She took a step toward the door. "And as of 5 minutes ago, when you signed that agreement mocking me for taking a worthless shell, Caldwell Innovations belongs to me." Harrison lunged across the table, grabbing the executed divorce papers from Silas. "Rip it up, Brecker, shred it. The deal is off." "It's already filed," Evelyn said calmly. "My lawyer, Arthur, has been sitting in the court clerk's office for the last hour. I texted him the moment I signed. The digital receipt is in my inbox." She stopped at the door and looked back. Harrison looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and hadn't hit the ground yet. "Oh, and Harrison," she added, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips. "I'm raising the licensing fee for the software, effective immediately. It's going to be substantial. You might want to cancel lunch." She walked out. But the elevator ride down wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because Harrison Caldwell wasn't the type of man to lose $1 billion asset without a fight. And Evelyn knew that the hardest part wasn't signing the papers. It was surviving what came next. The glass vase that shattered against the wall of Harrison's office was an authentic Ming Dynasty artifact valued at roughly $45,000. At that moment, Harrison didn't care. He would have burned the entire building down if it meant getting the last hour of his life back. "Fix it!" he screamed, his voice cracking. The veins in his neck were distended, pulsing with a dangerous rhythm. "I pay this firm $3 million a year in retainers. Fix it!" Silas, the senior partner, looked significantly older than he had 20 minutes ago. He was pacing the length of the Persian rug, a phone pressed to one ear and a tablet in his hand. "Harrison, please lower your voice. The secretaries can hear you," Silas hissed, covering the mouthpiece. "I don't care about the secretaries. I care about the fact that my ex-wife, a woman whose biggest decision last year was what color to paint the guest room, just walked out of here holding the keys to my entire kingdom." Harrison slammed his hands on the desk. "Get a judge. Get an emergency injunction. Freezing order. Anything claim she stole the documents. Claim she wasn't of sound mind. We can't claim she stole them. Brecker, the junior associate, piped up from the corner, his voice trembling. "You handed them to her. We have it on video. The conference room records all negotiations for liability purposes." Harrison shot Brecker a look that suggested homicide was a viable legal strategy. "Then claim fraud. She misled us about the contents of the LLC." "She didn't mislead anyone," Silas said, finally hanging up the phone. His face was grey. "I just spoke to our IP audit team. The transfer of the Atlas algorithm code to Caldwell Innovations was executed in 2019. It was signed by you, Harrison. It was filed with the Patent Office. The retransfer back to the parent company. The one you were supposed to sign. I told her to handle it. Yes, but you never signed it," Silas said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Legally, Caldwell Logistics has been operating on a lease of that software for 5 years, an implied lease. But now that the ownership has changed hands, the new owner is under no obligation to continue that lease." Harrison sank into his chair. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping nausea. "What does that mean, Silas?" In plain English. "It means," Silas said, "that if she wants to, she can turn off the lights." 5 miles away, in a cramped office above a Thai restaurant in Queens, the air smelled of basil and old carpet. This was the headquarters of Arthur Penske, attorney at law. It was a far cry from the marble floors of the Sterling Holloway building, but to Evelyn it felt like a fortress. Arthur was a short man, with thick glasses and a penchant for wearing suspenders that were slightly too bright. He was currently pouring cheap champagne into 2 paper coffee cups. "To the worthless shell," Arthur said, raising his cup with a grin that showed off a chipped front tooth. Evelyn took the cup, her hand finally shaking now that the adrenaline had worn off. She took a sip. It was warm and overly sweet, but it tasted like victory. "Did they call yet?" Evelyn asked, eyeing the ancient landline on Arthur's desk. "Not yet," Arthur said, sitting down in his creaky swivel chair. "They're still throwing furniture. Give it another hour. Then comes the panic. Then comes the bullying." "Harrison will try to freeze my accounts," Evelyn said, staring at a water stain on the ceiling. "He'll cancel my credit cards. He'll try to lock me out of the penthouse before I can even pack." "Let him," Arthur shrugged. "You're not going back to the penthouse, Evie. We talked about this. You go back there, he manufactures an incident. He claims you broke something or attacked him. You stay at the Motel 6 tonight. Tomorrow you move into the rental I found you in Jersey." Evelyn nodded. It was a steep fall from grace. Manhattan socialite to a motel in Jersey. But she had prepared for this. For 6 months, she had been siphoning small amounts of cash grocery money, spa day, allowances, and stashing it. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy food and pay Arthur. "I need to send the email," Evelyn said, setting down the cup. "Are you sure?" Arthur asked, his expression turning serious. "Once you send this, there's no going back. This isn't a divorce anymore. It's a declaration of war against a billion-dollar entity. They will come for you with everything." Evelyn thought about the last 10 years. She thought about the way Harrison had dismissed her ideas. She thought about the business trips that were thinly veiled affairs. She thought about the way he had looked at her in that conference room like she was something he needed to scrape off his shoe. She opened her laptop. "I'm sure," she said. She typed a short professional email to the CTO of Caldwell Logistics. Subject: Notice of Licensing Fee Adjustment to J. Miller, CTO. From Evelyn Caldwell, CEO, Caldwell Innovations, LL, said, "Dear Mr. Miller, please be advised that the implied license for the use of the Atlas Logistics algorithm has been terminated effective immediately due to a change in ownership. Caldwell Innovations is willing to negotiate a new licensing agreement. Until such an agreement is signed, unauthorized use of the Atlas software constitutes intellectual property theft. Starting rate $500,000 per day. Payable weekly. Regards, Evelyn." She hit send. $500,000 a day. Arthur whistled. That's aggressive. He makes $10 million a day in revenue, Evelyn said, closing the laptop. 500 grand is a rounding error for him. It's not about the money, Arthur. It's about making him acknowledge me. I want him to write the check. I want him to see my name on the ledger every single week. The phone on Arthur's desk rang. A shrill, mechanical scream. Arthur looked at Evelyn. Evelyn nodded. Arthur picked up the receiver. "Law Offices of Arthur Penske. Oh, hello, Silas. How's the weather up on the 44th floor?" Evelyn listened as Arthur went silent, nodding occasionally. "No," Arthur said firmly. "No, we will not be accepting a lump sum buyout. No, Mrs. Caldwell is not experiencing a mental health crisis. No, we will not meet you for dinner." He paused, listening to Silas shout on the other end. "Here is the reality, Silas," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all its jovial warmth. "Your client built a castle on land he doesn't own. Now the landlord is here to collect rent. You have the invoice. You have 24 hours to wire the first payment, or we file an injunction to shut down the servers. Have a nice day." He hung up. "He threatened to sue you for extortion," Arthur said. "Good," Evelyn said, standing up and grabbing her coat. "That means they're scared." But as she walked out into the cool Queen's afternoon, Evelyn didn't feel brave. She felt hunted. She knew Harrison. He wouldn't just sue. He would escalate. And behind Harrison were people much worse than him. The silent investors, the private equity ghouls who owned 49% of Caldwell Logistics. They wouldn't like their profit margins being held hostage by an ex-wife. She pulled her coat tighter. The game had started, but she had a feeling the rules were about to change. The breakdown started slowly. That was the beauty of the Atlas algorithm. It wasn't just a map. It was a brain. It coordinated 5,000 trucks, 300 ships, and 20 air freight hubs in real time. It adjusted for weather traffic, fuel prices, and driver fatigue. When Evelyn sent the email, nothing exploded. But inside the server room of Caldwell Logistics, a digital command had been received. Evelyn hadn't just taken the company name. She had the admin keys. She hadn't shut the system down that would be illegal, a malicious act that could get her arrested. Instead, she had simply revoked the optimization privileges. At 9 a.m. on Tuesday, the trucks were running at 98% efficiency. By 2 p.m., they were at 85%. By Wednesday morning, the entire supply chain was bleeding. Drivers were being routed into traffic jams. Perishable cargo was sitting on docks for hours. Fuel costs spiked by 12% overnight. The chaos wasn't visible to the public yet, but inside Caldwell Logistics, the alarms were screaming. Harrison hadn't slept in 30 hours. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He was standing in the ops center, watching the red lines multiply on the massive global map. "Why can't we override it?" he yelled at Miller, the CTO. "Because the core code is encrypted," Miller yelled back, sweating. "We can run the trucks manually, but without Atlas we're flying blind. We're losing $3 million a day in delays alone, Harrison. Just pay her. Pay the woman the damn money. I will not negotiate with a terrorist, Harrison roared. Then you will lose this company, a calm voice said from the doorway. The room went silent. The ops technicians lowered their heads, typing furiously to look busy. Harrison turned. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked like he had been sketched in charcoal. He wore a black suit, a black shirt, and no tie. His hair was silver, his eyes dark and unreadable. It was Gideon Vale, the representative for Obsidian Capital, the shadow firm that had injected $500 million into Caldwell Logistics 2 years ago. Gideon, Harrison said, his voice losing its bluster. I didn't know you were in town. I wasn't, Gideon said, walking into the room. He didn't look at the screens. He looked only at Harrison. But then my dashboard showed a projected quarterly loss of 15%. So I took a jet. Gideon stopped in front of Harrison. He was shorter than Harrison, but he loomed larger. You told us the divorce was handled. You told us the assets were ring-fenced. She tricked us, Harrison stammered. It's a technicality, a clerical error. We're going to crush her in court. Court takes months, Gideon said softly. The market reacts in minutes. If the shareholders find out that our logistics software is held hostage by an angry ex-spouse, the stock price will collapse by noon. We are not going to court, Harrison. Then what do we do? Gideon adjusted his cufflinks. We remove the obstacle. Evelyn was grocery shopping in a bodega in Jersey City when she felt it. That prickle on the back of her neck. The sensation of being watched. She turned. A man in a blue windbreaker was examining cans of soup a little too intensely. When she looked at him, he turned away. Paranoia, she told herself. You've been watching too many movies. She paid for her pasta and eggs with cash and walked back to the small rental house Arthur had found. It was a bungalow with peeling paint, but it had a heavy deadbolt. She locked the door and sat at the kitchen table. She opened her laptop. New message from Caldwell, logistics accounts, payable. Attached wire transfer receipt, $500,000. Harrison had paid. The first day's ransom. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. He had blinked. But the relief was short-lived. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello. Mrs. Caldwell, a voice said. Smooth, cultured, chilling. This is Gideon Vale. Evelyn froze. She knew the name. Harrison had mentioned him only in hushed tones. The money man. The man who didn't attend board meetings, but decided the votes. Mr. Vale, Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady. To what do I owe the pleasure? If this is about the licensing agreement, you can speak to my lawyer. I don't speak to lawyers, Evelyn. Lawyers are for people who intend to follow the law. I am a businessman. What do you want? I want to meet, tonight. There is a diner on Route 9, the Starlight, 8 o'clock. Come alone, and if I don't, then the private investigators I currently have parked outside your mother's nursing home in Florida might decide to go inside and say hello. She has a heart condition, doesn't she? Startling easily, I hear. The blood drained from Evelyn's face. You leave her out of this. 8 o'clock, Evelyn. Don't be late. The line went dead. Evelyn sat there, the phone slippery in her sweating hand. This was the escalation Arthur had warned her about. Harrison was a bully, but he wasn't a gangster. Gideon Vale was different. She called Arthur. Don't go, Arthur said immediately. It's a trap. We call the police. And tell them what, Evelyn said, pacing the small kitchen. That a venture capitalist asked me to dinner, They won't do anything until something happens, and I can't risk my mother, Arthur. Evelyn, these people play for keeps. I know, Evelyn said. Her fear was hardening into something else. Anger. Cold, sharp anger. They thought they could scare her. They thought she was just a housewife who got lucky. I'm going, she said, but I need you to set up the dead man's switch. The what? Access the server. Evelyn commanded. Her voice dropping into a tone Harrison would have recognized the tone she used when she was fixing his messes. I want you to write a script. If I don't log in and enter a password every 6 hours, I want the Atlas code to delete itself. Not just shut down, wipe. Irrecoverable. Evelyn, that's nuclear. If you destroy the code, you destroy the value of the asset you own. You'll be left with nothing. If I don't come back from this diner, Arthur, I won't care about the asset. Do it. The Starlight Diner was a chrome and neon relic from the 50s. It was half empty. Evelyn slid into a booth near the back. Gideon Vale was already there. He was cutting a piece of cherry pie with surgical precision. You're punctual, he said, not looking up. I like that. It suggests you value time. Harrison wastes time. He wastes oxygen, frankly. I'm not here to talk about Harrison, Evelyn said. She placed her phone on the table screen down. Gideon finally looked at her. His eyes were like shark skin, flat and rough. No, you're here to sign the transfer deed back to the company. I have the papers right here, and a check for $2 million. A generous severance. The asset is worth $1 billion, Evelyn said. To us, Gideon corrected. To you, it's a target on your back. You're playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Caldwell. You've embarrassed powerful men. You've disrupted commerce. Do you think we're going to let you keep bleeding us for $500,000 a day? I think you don't have a choice, Evelyn said. Because if anything happens to me, if I have an accident, if I vanish, if my mother gets startled, the code disappears. Gideon paused his fork, hovering halfway to his mouth. Excuse me, I have a dead man's switch. Evelyn lied. Well, it was a half lie. Arthur was coding it right now. Every 6 hours, I have to authenticate my identity. If I don't, the server executes a total wipe. No backups, no recovery. The algorithm that runs your empire turns into zeros. Gideon placed the fork down slowly. He studied her face, looking for the twitch, the tell. Evelyn stared right back. She thought of the years of silence, the years of being mocked. The fear was gone. You're bluffing, Gideon said softly. Try me, Evelyn said. She leaned forward. Kill me, and you lose $1 billion instantly. Kidnap me, and you lose it in 6 hours. Threaten my family, and I trigger it myself just to watch you burn. For the first time, Gideon Vale looked unsure. He saw something in her eyes that he hadn't expected. He had expected a scorned wife. He was looking at a CEO. $2 million is a lot of money, Gideon said, his voice less threatening, more negotiating. The price is $500,000 a day, Evelyn said, standing up. And I want a seat on the board. Gideon laughed, a dry, rasping sound. A seat on the board. Now you are delusional. I own the technology that powers the company, Evelyn said. I don't just want the rent, Gideon. I want control. I want to watch Harrison squirm every time he walks into a meeting and sees me sitting at the head of the table. She picked up her bag. Tell Harrison I'll see him at the quarterly review next week. If the wire transfer is late tomorrow, the trucks stop moving. She walked out of the diner, her legs shaking so hard she almost fell. She got into her car, locked the doors, and drove. She had bought herself time. She had neutralized Gideon for the moment, but she had also painted a massive target on her back. She had just told the devil that she had a bomb strapped to her chest. Now she just had to hope Arthur could actually build the bomb before they called her bluff. The boardroom of Caldwell Logistics was a glass cage suspended 44 floors above Manhattan. It was designed to intimidate. The table was a 20-foot slab of black marble. The chairs were ergonomic masterpieces that cost more than most cars. At 9:00 a.m. on Monday, the room was full. The board of directors, 8 men and 2 women, all veterans of high finance and industry, sat in hushed conversation. Harrison sat at the head of the table, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His tan was fading, replaced by a sallow grayness. Gideon Vale sat to his right, perfectly still, like a statue carved from obsidian. The double doors opened. Evelyn walked in. She wasn't wearing the grey cardigan anymore. She was wearing a tailored white suit, sharp and immaculate. Her hair was pulled back. She held a leather portfolio. Behind her trailed Arthur, looking uncomfortable, in a suit that was clearly rented, clutching a briefcase. "Gentlemen, ladies," Evelyn said, her voice projecting clearly. She walked to the empty seat at the opposite end of the table, the seat usually reserved for the CFO. "I believe I'm late. Traffic in the tunnel was a nightmare." Harrison stood up, his knuckles white as he gripped the marble. "You don't have a seat here, Evelyn. Get out." "Actually," Gideon's voice cut through the air, "she does." Harrison whipped his head around to look at Gideon. The betrayal was palpable. "Mrs. Caldwell controls the intellectual property that constitutes our primary operational asset," Gideon said, his eyes fixed on the table. "Under the bylaws, any stakeholder with a controlling interest in critical infrastructure is entitled to observer status. Sit down, Harrison." Harrison sat, his jaw working furiously. Evelyn took her seat. She opened her portfolio. "Shall we begin? I've reviewed the quarterly projections. They look optimistic given the current licensing fees you're paying." The meeting was a bloodbath. For 2 hours, Evelyn didn't just observe. She dissected. She asked about the fuel hedging strategy, which was flawed. She questioned the expansion into Southeast Asia, which was over budget. She used the knowledge she had gained from years of listening to Harrison vent at the dinner table details he thought she had ignored. Harrison tried to interrupt her. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's an art history major." "And you," Evelyn countered, looking him dead in the eye, "are a CEO who forgot to sign a contract that cost this company $50 million in projected fees this quarter alone. Perhaps we should discuss competence, Harrison." The board shifted uncomfortably. A few members exchanged glances. They smelled blood in the water, and it wasn't Evelyn's. Then came the ambush. Harrison signaled to the screen at the front of the room. "Enough of this. While Evelyn is playing CEO, let's look at the reality of who we're dealing with." The screen flickered to life. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a video. It was grainy footage clearly taken by a private investigator. It showed Evelyn outside the Motel 6 in New Jersey, looking disheveled, carrying bags of fast food. Then it cut to her visiting Arthur's run-down office. "This is the business titan holding us hostage," Harrison sneered. "She's living out of a motel or Intel. She's broke. She's desperate. This licensing fee isn't business strategy. It's alimony by another name. She's mentally unstable, fueled by vindictiveness. I move for a vote of no confidence in her standing. We file for emergency conservatorship." The room went silent. It was a low blow. Cruel. Public humiliation. Evelyn felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She looked at the faces around the table. They were looking at her with pity, with disdain. "Is that all?" Evelyn asked. Her voice didn't waver, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "It's enough," Harrison said. "You're a fraud, Evie. Go back to the motel." Evelyn stood up. She walked slowly towards the screen, standing in the light of her own grainy image. "It's true," she said to the room. "I am living in a motel. My accounts were frozen by Harrison's lawyers. I have been stripped of the lifestyle I helped build. But do you know why I'm in a motel?" She turned to face Harrison. "Because I spent the last of my liquid cash paying the server fees to keep your algorithm running this morning. Because while you were hiring investigators to stalk me, I was ensuring that the shipment of medical supplies to Chicago arrived on time. I prioritized the company. You prioritized your ego." She turned back to the board. "Harrison calls me unstable. I call myself the only person in this room who actually owns the thing that makes you money. You can vote to ignore me. You can vote to sue me. But if you do ask yourselves, do you trust Harrison to fix this? The man who broke it." She sat down. The silence stretched. Then the woman to Evelyn's left, the CEO of a major retail chain, spoke up. "She has a point, Harrison. The IP issue is an existential threat. Personal attacks don't solve it." Harrison looked around the room. He was losing them. "Fine," Harrison spat. "We form a special committee to negotiate a buyout, but she doesn't get a vote." "Agreed," Gideon said. "Meeting adjourned." As the room cleared, Harrison leaned in close to Evelyn. "You won a round, Evie," he whispered, his breath hot on her ear. "But you're still sleeping in a motel. And motels, they're not safe places. Accidents happen." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Try it, Harrison, and see what happens to your precious trucks." She walked out with her head high, but as soon as the elevator doors closed, she slumped against the wall. "That was too close." Arthur wiped sweat from his forehead. "He's getting desperate. Desperate men do stupid things." "I know," Evelyn said. "We need leverage, real leverage. The algorithm isn't enough anymore. We need dirt." The following week was a game of cat and mouse. The licensing checks arrived, but always at the last possible minute. Strange cars were parked outside Evelyn's rental house. Her phone clicked when she made calls. Evelyn and Arthur were working out of the basement of the rental, now treating it like a war room. They were digging through the old data backups Evelyn had on an external hard drive, files she had saved from the family computer before she left. "Here," Evelyn said, pointing at a spreadsheet. "Look at this. Project Orion." "What is it?" Arthur asked, peering at the screen. "It's a subsidiary Harrison set up in 2022. It's listed as a consultancy firm. But look at the payments. $5 million a month going to an account in Cyprus." "Kickbacks?" Arthur asked. "Or bribes," Evelyn said. "Evelyn, Caldwell Logistics got the government contract for military transport last year. If he was paying someone off to get that contract." "That's federal prison time," Arthur whispered. "That's not just leverage. That's a kill shot." "We need proof," Evelyn said. "We need the bank records from the Cyprus account." "I know a guy," Arthur said. "He's unconventional. A forensic accountant who used to work for the IRS before he got fired for hacking. He can trace it. Call him." Arthur left to make the call. Evelyn stayed in the basement, staring at the screen. The blue light reflected in her eyes. She felt like she was drowning in the corruption. 2 hours later, Arthur came back. He looked pale. "He can do it," Arthur said, "but it will cost $50,000, cash." I have the licensing money, Evelyn said. I'll withdraw it tomorrow. The next day, Evelyn went to the bank. She withdrew the cash. She met Arthur at a coffee shop. Here, she said, sliding the heavy envelope across the table. Arthur took it. He didn't look her in the eye. Are you okay, Arthur? Evelyn asked. You're shaking. Just blood sugar, Arthur mumbled. I'll get the records. Meet me at the office tonight, 9 p.m. He left quickly. Evelyn watched him go. A knot formed in her stomach. Something was wrong. Arthur had been her rock, her only ally. But he looked guilty. She shook it off. She was paranoid. Gideon's threats were getting to her. At 8:55 p.m., Evelyn climbed the stairs to Arthur's office. The door was unlocked. Arthur, she called out. The office was dark. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting long shadows across the room. Arthur was sitting at his desk. But he wasn't alone. Sitting in the client chair, legs crossed, was Gideon Vale. Evelyn froze in the doorway. What is this? Come in. Evelyn, Gideon said smoothly. Close the door. Evelyn looked at Arthur. He was staring at his hands. Arthur, she whispered. I'm sorry, Evie. Arthur said, his voice cracking. They found out about my brother. His brother has a rather unfortunate gambling debt, Gideon explained, examining his fingernails, and a pending indictment for securities fraud. We offered to make both disappear, in exchange for cooperation. Evelyn felt the floor drop out from under her. You sold me out. I didn't have a choice, Arthur cried, looking up, tears in his eyes. They were going to put him in jail. Evie, he's the only family I have. What did you give them, Arthur? Evelyn asked, her voice cold as ice. The dead man's switch, Gideon answered. He held up a flash drive, or rather the access codes to disable it. Arthur was kind enough to provide the back-end entry. Gideon stood up. He walked over to Evelyn. It's over, Mrs. Caldwell. We have the codes. Our IT team is scrubbing the dead man protocol as we speak. In 10 minutes, the threat will be neutralized. And without that threat, you have nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a document. The transfer deed. Sign it, now. And maybe I won't have you arrested for corporate extortion. Evelyn looked at the paper. Then she looked at Arthur. The man she had trusted. The man she had shared cheap champagne with. You took the 50,000 too, didn't you? She asked Arthur. Arthur nodded shamefully. Evelyn looked back at Gideon. The room felt very small. If I sign, she said, do I get to walk away? You get to walk away, Gideon said, penniless, but free. Evelyn took the pen. She looked at the document. It was the end. She had played the game, and she had lost. The house always wins. She brought the pen to the paper, and then she laughed. It was a low, dry laugh that made Gideon frown. Something funny, Mrs. Caldwell? Yes, Evelyn said, dropping the pen. You think Arthur is the only one who knows how to code? Gideon's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Arthur built the first dead man's switch, Evelyn said, looking at the sobbing lawyer with a mixture of pity and disgust. But I knew Arthur was weak. I knew you would get to him eventually. Everyone has a price, right, Gideon? She took a step back toward the door. So last night, after Arthur went to sleep, I installed a secondary protocol, a Judas protocol. It triggers not if I fail to log in, but if the primary dead man's switch is disabled by an external IP. Gideon's face went white. He pulled out his phone. He dialed frantically. Check the server. Check it now. He listened for a second. Then he threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. "What did you do?" he hissed, advancing on her. "I encrypted the data," Evelyn said. "It's not deleted. That would be wasteful. It's ransomed. The key is in my head, and unlike the dead man's switch, this one doesn't wait 6 hours. It's already locked. The trucks are stopping Gideon, right now." She opened the door. "You have Arthur," she said, "but I still have the company, and the price just went up to $1 million a day." She ran down the stairs, leaving Gideon standing in the dark, staring at the man who had failed him. But as she hit the street, Evelyn knew one thing for sure. There would be no more meetings, no more negotiations. Gideon wouldn't try to sue her or buy her out anymore. Now they would just try to kill her. Rain in New York City acts like a shroud. It blurs the lines between the sidewalk and the street, between the predator and the prey. Evelyn left her car 3 blocks from Arthur's office, abandoning the Audi that had a GPS tracker embedded in its chassis. She took the subway riding the N train all the way to Coney Island and back just to break the surveillance chain. She wasn't running aimlessly. She was heading to the one place Harrison would never think to look. Years ago, during a brief scare, when Harrison had been investigated by the SEC, an investigation that mysteriously vanished, Evelyn had rented a small climate-controlled storage unit in Brooklyn under her grandmother's maiden name, Blackwood. She had stored tax returns there, backup hard drives, and old family photos. Harrison thought she was sentimental. In reality, she was creating an archive of his sins. She arrived at the storage facility at 2:00 a.m. The neon sign buzzed ominously. "Secure keep." She punched in the code. The gate rattled open. Inside Unit 404, she found the metal lockbox. Her hands were trembling, wet with rain and fear, as she dialed the combination. 0712. The date they were married. A date that used to mean love, now the combination to a vault of evidence. She opened it. There it was. The Project Orion hard drive. She had copied the files 3 days ago before Arthur turned on her. She hadn't told Arthur about the copy. It was the only secret she had kept from him, a lingering instinct from living with a liar like Harrison for a decade. Trust no one. Smart place to hide. A voice echoed down the concrete hallway. Evelyn froze. She turned slowly. Standing at the end of the corridor was the man in the blue windbreaker, Gideon's fixer. He held a silenced pistol loosely at his side. "How did you find me?" Evelyn asked, clutching the drive to her chest. "You're good, Mrs. Caldwell, but you're not a ghost. You used your debit card to buy a Metro card. Sloppy." He walked closer, his footsteps heavy. "Give me the drive. Gideon is willing to offer you a new deal. You live. That's the deal." Evelyn looked around. A concrete box, no exit, no windows. "And if I refuse, then you're a tragic victim of a robbery gone wrong in a bad neighborhood." He raised the gun. "Wait," Evelyn screamed. "The drive is encrypted without the password. It's a paperweight. If you kill me, the password dies. And the Judas Protocol stays active. The trucks never move again." The fixer paused. He tapped his earpiece. "She says it's encrypted." "Yeah." "Understood." He looked back at Evelyn. "Gideon says bring you in. Alive. But he didn't say you had to be walking." He lunged. Evelyn didn't run away. She threw the heavy metal lockbox at his face. It connected with a sickening crunch against his nose. The gun clattered to the floor. Evelyn scrambled past him, her heels slipping on the polished concrete. She didn't go for the gun. She wasn't a killer. She ran for the fire alarm on the wall. She pulled the lever. The klaxon screamed, deafening in the enclosed space. Sprinklers erupted from the ceiling, spraying black, stagnant water everywhere. "You bit!" the fixer shouted, wiping blood from his eyes, groping for his weapon in the deluge. Evelyn burst out of the side exit into the alleyway. She didn't stop. She ran until her lungs burned, until the taste of copper filled her mouth. She hailed a cab on the main avenue, soaking wet, clutching the hard drive like a holy relic. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked, eyeing her suspiciously in the rearview mirror. She needed to go to the source. She needed to end this where it began. "Midtown," Evelyn said, her voice hard. "The Sterling Holloway building." She pulled out her burner phone. She had one number left to call. Not a lawyer. Not a cop. She dialed Harrison. "Evie!" Harrison's voice was frantic. "Where are you?" "Gideon is—" "I know what Gideon is doing," Evelyn interrupted. "I'm coming to the office, Harrison. I'm bringing the Orion files." "Don't!" Harrison yelled. "He's here. He's in the boardroom. He'll kill you." "He can try," Evelyn said. "But Harrison, if you ever loved me, even for a minute, you better be ready to pick a side. Because in 20 minutes, I'm burning the whole thing down." She hung up and looked out the window. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. The game of cat and mouse was over. It was time for the lioness to enter the cage. The lobby of the Sterling Holloway building was empty at 3 a.m., save for the night security guard, an old man named Earl, who had known Evelyn for years. "Mrs. Caldwell." Earl blinked, looking at her sodden clothes. "You all right?" "I'm fine, Earl," Evelyn said, marching toward the elevators. "I forgot something upstairs. If anyone tries to come up after me, lock the elevators." "Yes, ma'am." She swiped her keycard. Gideon had tried to deactivate it, but he had missed the secondary admin override she had installed in the security mainframe. The light turned green. The elevator rose. 10, 20, 30, 44. The doors opened. The lights in the office were blazing. Standing in the center of the open-plan floor was Gideon Vale, flanked by 2 more security contractors. Harrison was pacing by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking like a ghost. "You have a death wish, Evelyn," Gideon said. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked bored. "You escaped my man in Brooklyn. Congratulations. But there are no fire alarms here." Evelyn walked into the room. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face, but she held the hard drive high. "The Orion files," she said. "Bank transfers, emails, dates, times. Proof that you and Harrison bribed a frantic senator to secure the defense contract. Proof of money laundering through Cyprus." Harrison flinched. "Evie, please, put it down." "Give it to me," Gideon said, extending a hand. "And I will let you walk out. I'll even release the trucks. We can call it a draw." "A draw?" Evelyn laughed. She walked over to the nearest workstation, a desk belonging to a junior analyst. She plugged the hard drive in. "What are you doing?" Gideon signaled his men. They drew their weapons. "Don't shoot!" Harrison screamed, stepping between them and Evelyn. "If you shoot her, the noise triggers the building sensors. The police will be here in 2 minutes." "I own the police," Gideon roared. "Move, Harrison." Evelyn's fingers flew across the keyboard. "You might own the local precinct, Gideon, but do you own the NASDAQ?" "What?" Evelyn hit the Enter key. On the massive wall of screens at the front of the room, the screens usually used to track global shipments, a new window popped up. Then another. Then another. "I just uploaded the Orion files to the SEC whistleblower portal," Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the tension. "And I CC'd the the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Department of Defense Inspector General. Gideon froze. His face went ashen. You didn't." "I did," Evelyn said. "The email just went out. You can shoot me now, Gideon. But you can't shoot the internet. It's done. The stock price will hit 0 by the opening bell." Gideon stared at the screen. He saw the confirmation receipts. The magnitude of the destruction hit him. It wasn't just a loss. It was annihilation. He slowly lowered his hand. He looked at Harrison. "You," Gideon whispered. "You brought this woman into our lives. You couldn't control your own wife." "She's not my wife," Harrison said, his voice quiet, looking at Evelyn with a strange mixture of horror and awe. "She's the CEO." Sirens began to wail in the distance. Not one or two, a fleet of them. Evelyn leaned back against the desk, exhaustion finally hitting her. "I suggest you call your lawyers boys, although I doubt they can help with treason charges." Gideon looked at the window, perhaps calculating the drop. Then with a sneer he sat down in a chair and straightened his tie. "It's a white-collar crime, Evelyn. I'll be out on bail by lunch. I'll spend 2 years in a minimum security camp playing tennis. You haven't won." "Maybe," Evelyn said. "But you're forgetting one thing." "What's that?" "The Judas Protocol," Evelyn said. "I never unlocked the trucks." "So," Gideon spat. "The company is dead anyway." "No," Evelyn said. "The logistics company is dead, but the software, the IP that I own, is worth more than the trucks. And while you were arguing, I signed a sale agreement." She turned the monitor around. "Acquisition offer accepted. Amazon Web Services acquires Atlas Algorithm for $1.2 billion. "I sold it," Evelyn said, "to your biggest competitor. They don't want the trucks. They just want the code. And since I'm the sole owner of Caldwell Innovations, I keep the check." Harrison dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. You sold my life's work." "No, Harrison," Evelyn said, walking past him toward the elevators as the flashing lights of police cruisers washed over the walls. "I sold my property. You just worked there." The elevator doors opened. A SWAT team poured out, shouting commands. "FBI, hands in the air!" Evelyn stepped aside, letting them swarm past her. They grabbed Gideon. They grabbed Harrison. Harrison looked back at her as he was cuffed. He looked small, defeated. "Evie," he called out. "Evie, help me. I'm your husband." Evelyn pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors began to slide shut, framing Harrison's desperate face, she offered him one last small smile. "Sorry," she said. "I don't recall signing a contract for that." The doors closed. 6 months later, Evelyn sat on the terrace of a villa in Lake Como. The sun was warm, the air smelled of jasmine. She wore a simple dress, but on her finger was a new ring, a massive sapphire she had bought for herself. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from the news. Gideon Vale, sentenced to 25 years for racketeering. Harrison Caldwell accepts plea deal, 8 years in federal prison. Evelyn swiped the notification away. She picked up her glass of wine and looked out over the water. She had walked into that conference room, a victim. She had walked out a billionaire. They had mocked her silence. They had underestimated her kindness. But they had forgotten the oldest truth in the world. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And sometimes that hand knows exactly how to make a fist. Harrison thought he was playing chess with a pawn, unaware that Evelyn had already bought the board, the pieces, and the building they were playing in. In the world of high-stakes business, arrogance is the ultimate weakness, and silence is the deadliest weapon. Evelyn didn't just survive the divorce. She monetized it, proving that when you back a woman into a corner, you'd better make sure she doesn't come out swinging a billion-dollar wrecking ball. If you enjoyed this story of supreme revenge and corporate warfare, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they held all the cards? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Until next time, keep your contracts tight and your secrets tighter.